Welcome back, everybody, to the Irish Fury, and I am the Irish Furian. Okay, so we're going to continue on. I think I've made the video a little bit better. It may still be a little bit laggy, a little bit stop-starty, but I'm doing my best. Bear with me. I've never used a digital SLR for a live camera, webcam before, recording camera. So this is what we're doing this evening, and so we're going to continue on with the Irish mythology videos from the Exploring series on YouTube, and the Exploring series is what it's called, yeah. And so you can then tell me how my video looks on screen. Is it choppy, changey, starty? Also, too, this one is going to be about Chulainn. Right, so how long is it? It's 19 minutes. Okay, we'll watch parts of it, all right? And I'll put the link in the description. I should have done the same for the Fionn McCool one. I forgot to mention, too, about the Fionn McCool video. I grew up, you know, my father used to take me out the fields. My father was from Laois, and we'd walk through the fields, and he'd point up towards the Slieve Bloom Mountains. I think you can see them from there. Maybe I'm remembering somewhere else that we're walking out in the fields. But he used to tell me about the stories about Fionn McCool. He used to tell me about say, how he was brought up and in the mountains, and he was trained, and how he burnt his thumb while pressing down a blister on the salmon of knowledge. All of what you saw in the last video, my father told me those stories while we were walking out, and I feel very blessed to have had that experience from my father, you know. So okay, so we'll just go straight on to the video here and start playing it, and I'll break it up every so often. You go. What I would strongly suggest is that you go and you look at it for yourself without me in it. Okay, this is just watching it with me, the Irish Furian. But I would suggest you go and watch it yourself. I'll leave the link in the description. They're fantastic videos. The artwork is phenomenal. The narrator is just incredible. So let's do this, okay?
Chulainn. From Hercules to Spartacus to Captain America.
And keep in mind, this is ours. All of this is ours. Yours and mine, the native Irish. These are our stories. These are our stories. Nobody else's. All right? This is important.
History is filled with great and legendary heroes, both real and fictional, and Celtic mythology has no shortage of heroic figures. While King Arthur has been far more prevalent in popular culture, Chulainn is
well, that's a real anime one, isn't it? It's got a real anime look to it.
easily among the most well-known Celtic heroes. Chulainn's tales invoke many of the tropes that we're familiar with in mythological heroes. A connection to the gods, unsurpassed beauty and combat prowess, unshakable bravery and honor, and a tragic death. Like many parts of Celtic mythology, stories and characters have been expanded upon, altered, and twisted over the centuries, but this video should provide a brief look at the common depiction of Chulainn. There are a couple different versions of Chulainn's birth, but the most common one involves Chulainn's mother, the sister of a king, who disappeared.
That's a really nice painting. It's got a real watercolor vibe to it. I really like that.
Along with 50 other maidens, one day from the capital. Despite men searching for them for 3 years, they couldn't be found anywhere. A flock of birds came to the plains outside of the capital and destroyed the vegetation there. So the men, along with the king, readied their chariots to hunt down the birds. They followed the birds throughout the day, but by nightfall the birds managed to escape their pursuit, and so they searched for shelter.
He's just a natural narrator, this guy. He's got a very relaxed falling into the tone of each sentence, which is really nice. Look at that. Isn't that an incredible work of art? Like a cottage in the woods.
They found a small house and were invited in by the married couple there. And so all of the men came into the house along with their horses. The house turned out to be very large.
Which was normal in those days, taking your horse into the house.
And majestic. And the couple there revealed themselves to be the sister of the king and the champion of the Chulainn, Lu. During the night, Lu's wife went into labor, and in the morning the king found a baby wrapped in his cloak.
If you see me doing this during the video, you can see now how when I stop the video playing, my motion becomes a lot more fluid. You can see there's a lot more fluid. Now watch when I play the video again, it'll get a lot more stop-starty. Anyway, I'm just doing that for test.
The child was named Setanta and was raised outside of the capital. When the boy was 7, he decided to head towards the capital so that he could join the boy troop of aspiring knights. Against his parents' wishes, he leaves his home on his own, carrying only his wooden toy weapons. Upon arrival, he immediately approaches the group of boys in the field, ignoring the custom of asking for their protection first, due to being unaware of it. The boys take this as a challenge, and he is assailed by all...
It's incredible, isn't it? How masculine the story is. How based in masculine power the understanding of how to be around other men and men you didn't know and societies, groups of people you didn't know, when you came across them. Because you lived in one area all the time and you didn't have access in knowledge and understanding and mind to even just beyond the next couple of hills, You lived in a certain area and that was where you invested your physicality, your being. There wasn't all computers or cameras and nothing like that. So it was actually your body and your mind, which gave you prowess, gave you validation, gave you accreditation in society. So, this is like, if you believe in, I'm not sure if I believe in evolution anymore, but I believe in adaptation. And the masculine is definitely very different from the feminine. We are of a certain way of being. And when that gets translated into the current era, it can become so abstract that it becomes lost, that this way of being is how it is to be a man, or at least it's in the back of our minds how to that there is a certain way of being that we have lost, and we've kind of conceded to the feminine way of being in the world, but we're not feminine, we're men. You understand? There's a way of being.
150 of them. While normally this would prove insurmountable, Setanta suddenly undergoes a process called a rheostrad, sometimes called a warp spasm. This process turns the boy into a monstrous thing, where his entire body shakes and his legs twist around backwards. His mouth...
Isn't that incredible painting? Look at that. Isn't that just insanely amazing?
Distorts, peeling his cheeks back far enough that it's said you could see his lungs looking down his throat. One of his eyes falls out while the other sinks deep into his skull. His hair stands up on its ends, sharp enough to impale.
Which kind of reminds me of, I think it is Chulainn, I think, or Slane or Chulainn, whatever it is, from the magazine, the cartoon magazine, drawing magazine. I used to be a fan of when I was a kid, but it was a British one. And there was an artist called Simon Bisley. And myself and a friend used to draw each other's favourite character till 1 and 2 in the morning. We'd be drawing, he'd be drawing mine, I'd be drawing his. And we just said, let's swap and see who draw each other and see which is the best and all the rest of it, the competitive spirit. Like, he went on to be a tattoo artist, actually, that guy. But so I don't know, actually, did I get him to draw Slane or Chulainn? Anyway, this just reminded me of it because he used to go into a battle warp spasm as well, But obviously they've taken it from this story here, the story of Chulainn and his warp spasm,
Massive muscles cover his entire body. With this tremendous form, he easily defeats the group of boys, and afterwards demands that they put themselves under his protection.
Swapped
Sometime
over.
Later, a smith named Chulainn invited the king to a feast at his home. While on his way there, the king saw his nephew, Setanta, playing hurling, and was so impressed that he invited him to join him for the feast. Setanta told the king he would join him once the game was finished, and later Chulainn asked the king if he was expecting anyone else.
Just going into ads. Right, we'll get by those really quickly as possible.
The king had
For any of you who, if you watch a bit of YouTube, did you know that on your keypad, if you're watching it on a PC or if you're watching it on a laptop, you can pause it with the key of K, and you can actually skip ahead 10 seconds by pressing the next one up, L. And if you want to go back 10 seconds, you just press J. Did you know that? On a phone, on an Android phone, you double press, you tap, 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 like that, or 3 times, 2 or 3 times, it'll skip forward 10, or it'll skip back 10. But if you're on a keyboard, you can actually skip forward 10 seconds by pressing the L, 10 seconds back by pressing J, or pause the video by pressing K.
forgotten about Setanta.
See? Which I just did. I didn't even have to use the cursor over in the interact window over in the other monitor. But hopefully now my digital SLR keeps going. We'll keep going with this anyway, guys. I hope you're enjoying it.
And told the smith no. And so Chulainn unleashes his ferocious hound, so that it may protect his home from any threats. When Setanta finally does show up, he is attacked by the hound and kills it. Chulainn is devastated by the loss of his hound, and so Setanta tells him that until he can rear a replacement, he himself will guard his home, earning him the name Chulainn, meaning Chulainn's hound.
And that's how he got his name. That's how Chulainn got his name. He basically killed Setanta's dog, his hound, and if I got that right, I think it's Setanta, yeah. We need to learn these. We need to learn these stories. I may actually do a series on this channel where I learn each of these tales and actually recount them and try and get all the details, remember the details as best I can, or not as best I can, accurately, and recount them. And I'll try and tell this story. I was thinking of doing that. But that's how Chulainn got his name. He killed the Lord's, I think it was Setanta, his hound. So he became the Hound of Chulainn until he could rear him a new hound. Isn't that cool? It's a great story, like.
One day, while Chulainn was still 7 years old, he overheard a druid instructing his pupils, telling them that any warrior who took up arms this day would become famous.
That's a photograph of Chulainn.
In Ireland forever. Chulainn goes to his uncle, the king, and asks for some weapons, but they all ended up breaking due to his strength. After going through 15 sets, the king finally gives him his own weapons, which manage to not break. When the druid sees that Chulainn has taken up arms, he laments that Chulainn didn't hear the entire prophecy, as the warrior would become famous forever, but would live a short life. Chulainn replied that he would be okay living for only a single day, as long as he was famous forever.
And this is where we get into the human condition part of the story. Isn't it fantastic? And this is what I love about this series. This man, this narrator, correctly includes all of the human weaknesses, strengths, follies of each character in this series. And like you can see, it's like when there's a movie. It's like when there's a movie. A good movie. Each character has many different layers and levels to them. You know, you see the fullness of who they are. And Irish stories are rich in this. This is something we need to be aware of. That Irish stories are rich in the colour, the tapestry, the strengths, the weakness, the humanity of the people involved in the stories, the characters. Let us continue.
Chulainn rides off and eventually eventually kills 3 warriors who had boasted about how many of Cuchulainn's kinsmen they had slaughtered. Cuchulainn went under another Rheastrad when he killed them, and was still undergoing it when he returned to the capital. The king feared that in his frenzy, Cuchulainn could easily slaughter the young men of the city, and so they devised a plan to subdue him. The women of the city gathered together and bared their breasts to the fearsome boy.
Now that's the kind of thing that was on 2000 AD. The magazine, the comic book, back in the 80s, 90s, 2000 AD. They were the kind of drawings like by the different artists in it. It was very much like that. But that's right. And that thing about, we say, women baring their breasts to calm the men down, that's kind of, that is actually, I think, that's something that is carried on in different stories, Irish mythology and history, was that when men would come back from war or battle, they would do that to actually calm the men down, to debrief them, to actually bring them back into society. Because the female breast is back then wasn't the over-sexualized thing that it is now. It was very much to do with child rearing and being a mother. And obviously, when younger and the more supple they were in how they appeared, there was obviously a more sexual element to it, but because it was a display of fertility, But regardless, they calmed the men down. It brought them back into society, Let us continue.
Despite his monstrous frenzy, Cuchulainn retained his excessive modesty, and so shied his eyes away from the women. In that moment, he was seized by a group of men and dunked into a vat of cold water in an attempt to calm him. The first vat of water instantly boiled, and the vat broke, so they dunked him in a second one, with the same effect. They dunked him into a third one, causing the water to become hot, but by this point, Cuchulainn had calmed out of his frenzy. As Cuchulainn grew old...
Isn't that fantastic, you really do get the feeling of, when somebody has lost the rag, but if it was a big man and it was a time where physicality was the norm, where battle, where fighting, where being able to stand your ground, shame and honor were the norm of society, and men held that ground, that, if a bloke had lost the rag, that a whole load of guys would just fucking dunk him in some water to cool him down and say, cool the hell down. But like they've expanded this into kind of like a fantastical event, like with Cuchulainn, where he's boiling the water by his very his rage and his war spasm,
Older, he was so incredibly handsome that the men of the kingdom worried that he would take their wives and daughters without a wife of his own. Men searched Ireland for a year for a suitable wife, but Cuchulainn had settled on Emer, a beautiful woman living on the edge of the kingdom. Her father opposed the situation, however, either because it wasn't right that his youngest daughter got married before his oldest, or because of Cuchulainn's fearsome reputation. Whatever the case, the father visits the king in disguise and suggests to send Cuchulainn to be trained in Scotland by a legendary warrior, hoping that Cuchulainn will die in the process. Cuchulainn accepts the proposition, and while he's away, Emer's father attempts to marry her off to another king. But when the king hears that she is in love with Cuchulainn, he refuses out of fear. Cuchulainn trained with a female Scottish warrior, who teaches him extensively in the arts of war.
What?
Specifically, she trains him to use the Gae Bolg.
I can't understand this at all, Like, they say the same thing about, we say, Fionn McCool, that he was trained by a female warrior. And here Cuchulainn went to Scotland and was trained by a female warrior. This makes no sense to me. Women have 40% less upper body strength than men. Like, in no time in history are there any accounts of women being warriors. None. Except maybe where there's no men left and they decided to put up a stand. Just maybe one or two historical accounts of that, but it makes no sense. Like, the weakest of men still has more muscle More muscle, ligament, and bone density than the strongest of women. So I don't understand why this is in old Irish mythological stories, but let us continue.
A terrifying spear-like weapon made from the bones of a sea creature that contains many painful barbs. The flesh must be cut out around any wound made by this weapon in order to remove the spear. After finishing his training and having multiple sexual affairs, Chulainn returns to Ireland to marry Emer, but her father still refuses to give her up. Angered, Chulainn storms his castle, slaughtering 24 men as well as Emer's father, steals his treasure, and takes Emer with him. Chulainn's most well-known tale occurs when he is merely 17, known as the Cattle Raid of Chulainn. Despite its seemingly innocuous title, the events involve Chulainn single-handedly defending the kingdom from an army.
They look like older heavy metal album covers, don't they? Sorry, I put my hand on the table. My camera is on a precariously balanced articulating arm there on a tripod, and so like any movement at all with my hand on the table just shakes that. So I'm sorry about that, but they do look like metal band covers from the 1980s and 90s, you know. But let us continue.
Slaughtering hundreds in a tremendous battle frenzy and building walls of corpses. This tale is important enough to earn its own video, so we'll discuss it in detail some other time. Other stories of Chulainn, of course, exist throughout mythology, including competitions, many love affairs, including one with a fairy, and plenty of killing. But the prophecy of Chulainn's short life must eventually come true, and so we come to the tale of his death. Multiple conspirators began to gather against him, family members of those he had killed throughout his young life. They announced their intent.
Your past always catches up with you.
To attack Chulainn's land, and so he sets out to meet them. Those close to him beg for him not to go, as they know his death approaches, but he ignores them. The group conspired for him to break certain taboos that were forbidden to him, and would greatly weaken him in a fight. One of the taboos on Chulainn was he was forbidden from eating the meat of a dog.
That one I remember, yeah. And that may be actually a good historical explanation for why the Irish love dogs so much. You know, it's in our very mythology.
The old crones come to him one night on his way to the battle and offer him some dog meat to eat. Since there was a strong taboo across all of Ireland about refusing any hospitality, Chulainn was stuck in this situation, forced to break one of the two taboos. He chose to eat the meat, and because of this, the career of Chulainn both begins and ends with the killing of a dog. The breaking of the taboo causes his physical form to distort, leaving him as only half a man, without strength in one arm and one leg. Despite this weakness, Chulainn was still a fearsome foe, able to kill 9 men with a single throw of his spear, and left the battlefield a red mess. Finally, however, a spear destined to kill kings was thrown at Chulainn, and it split open his belly, forcing him to hold his intestines. Chulainn asked for a small break, so that he could take a small drink of water from a nearby lake. He gathered his intestines, walked to the lake.
Gather your intestines and get yourself some water.
Took a drink and washed his face.
As you do.
Was imminent. Wanting to die standing while facing his enemies,
he tied himself to the
tree.
tree.
He then lashed himself to a nearby standing stone.
That's
it's
right.
only when a raven lands on his shoulder that his enemies believe Chulainn is truly dead.
That's right, yeah.
And they approach.
That's the story.
One of them beheads Chulainn, and a light begins to burst forth from Chulainn's body. His sword falls from his hand, cutting off the hand of his beheader. The light only dissipates once they cut off Chulainn's sword arm, leaving him truly dead. Chulainn is an interesting mythological hero. more akin to the Incredible Hulk than to King Arthur. Although his battle frenzies have become his most well-known feature, studying the various tales associated with him give a large amount of insight to ancient traditions and histories of...
That's right. Yeah, you can see a lot in there. As I said, like the thing about the dog, you know, that the Irish have such a reverence for dogs. And you see it laid out in that story of Cuchulainn. It's best not forget these, you know. It's best to learn them and retell them and listen to them again and again and tell your children about these, you know. Be proud of your past, be proud of your history and your prehistory. It's who we are. And whatever the future entails, whatever the present occurs in the present, this is part of our past, you know. Some of it will be manipulated, some of it will be true, and it's fun trying to discern which is which. So with that, I hope you enjoyed that. I strongly recommend you check out in the description the link to that video and go and listen to the thing in full and learn this story, enjoy the artwork, and there'll be more of these to come at some point in the future. So with that, I'll bid you good evening and grow your own food, have large families, get community with like-minded individuals, get a skill, and get God. Good night.